with that, I would like to introduce Juliette Kayyem.
Yes, hi, thank you, Ruben, thank you. I'm so grateful for all of you being here tonight. I've been waiting for this one, so thank you for having me. I should introduce people who matter to you, because I'll talk a little bit about the campaign, but Seffi is here, if you could raise your hand, and Jordan, two people who work for the campaign, and you know how it works, so if you like what you hear, go find them in terms of the caucuses. But I'm here to tell you about the campaign and about me. My name is Juliette Kayyem. There are many ways to describe me. I've been a public servant most of my career working in public safety. I have been a writer, a columnist, a teacher. I am a wife, and most importantly, I am the daughter of 3 children. And all of those different ways of describing me lead me to 2 important conclusions. First, that I believe government's capacity to do good. And as Democrats, I think we always have to say that. And second, that I always think government can do better. There is no finish line. No, thank you, Governor Patrick. That was great. Let's go to the other team. There is a constant push for progressive politics, for building the Massachusetts that we know will be stronger, more ready for the challenges ahead. And that's what I hope to bring to this campaign based on my experiences. But if you really want to know how to describe me, it is I am the daughter of a Lebanese immigrant family. My Sittu, that's Arabic in Lebanese, came here with 5 children. My mother was born in Lebanon, had 4 more here, raised them all alone in the public education system, the UC in California, the UC system. And she had 32, I think it was 32 grandchildren, of which I was just one, 70-something plus great-grandchildren at the time of her death. So we wore name tags at our family reunions, because that's, you know, you stop pretending at some stage. And as a sort of rascal grandkid, we used to sort of make fun of her. You know, she had this strong Lebanese Arabic accent. And she would pull out of her Ziploc bag, a bag that she would have to her dying day, this Ziploc bag. And it had the forms of her journey to America, her citizenship forms and her forms that sort of were proof of residency, her passport, the birth certificates of her 9 children, 2 of which she had outlived at that time by the time she died. And she would take out the Ziploc bag and she would say 2 words that I didn't really get then. And she would say, I belong, I belong, I belong, right? That is what her journey meant to her. And I'm sorry I didn't know what she meant when she was still alive, because it took many years later when I was Assistant Secretary for President Obama. That is a hard job, being Assistant Secretary at Homeland Security, as Ruben described. It's a lot of bad news situations. It's a lot of situations where people look to government to work. They don't really care what your philosophy is. And I was asked at the very end to come up here. We had moved, my husband and I had moved there for a few years, moved down to DC for a few years, and induct 400 new citizens of America and residents of Massachusetts at, of all places, Faneuil Hall, where we had the debates about what belonging meant. And they weren't perfect debates, and they were certainly imperfect from our start. And I'm standing over 400 new members of the Commonwealth and thinking, now I get it. Right, I belong. That somehow the new guard had become the old guard, and in fact, there is no new guard. There is no old guard. There is just us. People who are committed to this state and to the debates about the state and the future of the state. We all belong to this conversation, and that's why I'm here. I have, there are too many people who feel like they're not part of this conversation, who have not benefited as much as many of us have, who do not feel like they belong to the conversation. And to get them to the table sometimes takes breaking down barriers, fighting institutions, making government work across silos between the state government and 351 cities and towns. It takes creative problem solving, complex problem solving. The challenges we face will not be solved by a hammer to a nail. Never was that way, and it certainly won't be in the 21st century. I have known that all of my career. I did start, I know it's, Homeland Security sounds scary, so let me tell you the less scary part. I started off my career as a civil rights attorney working for a very young Assistant Attorney General named Deval Patrick. I've worked for him twice. And I brought institution breaking barrier-breaking litigation during that time. I brought the first federal lawsuit against a school district for peer-on-peer harassment. We call it bullying now, Title IX cases. And then most importantly, I was of record in cases that would eventually make it to the Supreme Court, the VMI and Citadel cases, in which military institutions were simply just closed to women. And people thought there's no way they'll survive. There's no way that you can break down those barriers. And we did. And if you think about the long haul, right, 30, 25 years later, those institutions are 40% women. South Carolina still stands. Virginia still stands. And maybe, you know, that's good or bad, but these are institutions that can be changed. It just takes the energy and creativity to change them. Later on, I ended up working for Governor Patrick again when he became governor. And asked me to be the state's first undersecretary for Homeland Security and his Homeland Security advisor. Again, there's no rule book. You need to figure out, I needed to figure out to make all the institutions that are part of our safety and security. And that's just not terrorism. It is about risk reduction. It is about building stronger, protecting our children, gun violence, crime. It is about getting the whole network and complex ecosystem that supports government engaged. And the solutions are not always the same, right? You can't often talk about Boston and Springfield in the same breath. And it takes working with the regions across disciplines, up and down the chain, and with the federal government to do that. I oversaw the National Guard. I like to say Scott Brown did report to me, just saying. And had to work with emergency management and other institutions to make government work. So, you need to get to know me and my history. And so I wanted to tell you a lot about that. 2 presidents and 1 governor have asked me to make government work when it matters the most. And I believe it matters all the time. The challenge of politics today is not the inbox, is not the solution for today. It is actually solving the problems of today in a way that makes us, is resilient in the future, that makes us stronger in the future. We can't just talk about job creation. We need to talk about Massachusetts jobs, the jobs that are here and are going to grow here, and the jobs that will come here and stay here. People often say, oh, my travels, I've been abroad, I've been to 44 other states. That is completely relevant to the governor. We're in a governor's role. We are in a competition with 49 other states for the brightest, the best, the investments, the immigrants who want to come here, students who need to stay here. We are winning, and we will continue to win if we understand that the gap between what we're teaching students in our higher education system, right, and the jobs that are going to thrive here in biotech and technology and clean energy and in new manufacturing, in the health services and human development and resource development in the health services and in infrastructure development, we will be able to create and maintain Massachusetts jobs in ways that are sustainable for the future. I also talk a lot about infrastructure. If we want to talk about a connected state, a state that connects to each other, that the benefits of what's happening in Side 95 reach outside, that the gateway cities are actually linked in ways that matters to commercial activity, which of course then buttresses all of them. We have to talk honestly about our infrastructure. It's not working. This present governor was right about investments in infrastructure. The port links us to a global economy. Springfield ought to be linked to Hartford. This is how we connect as a society and to each other, how we make sure everyone belongs. Just finally, I know I have to end. I will talk about these issues. I do want you to know one of the benefits of being outside, inside, but also breaking barriers is I want to take on challenges that no one's really talking about. Yesterday, I released a criminal justice reform initiative. It is the issue of our time. I find it depressing if I were to be governor that I'm expected to spend $1 billion on new prison construction in the next 10 years. So help me not do that. I find it empowering that we can commit to lowering lowering green gas emissions as a state, but I also find it empowering that as a state we can address climate change together, because we shouldn't debate climate. We're done with the climate change, is it happening debate. I'm done with it. I don't have that conversation. If you are governor, things will happen in the state in the next 10 years, and it's your solemn duty to protect people. Finally, veterans. I have worked with the military all my life. The military industry is very, very thriving here. I know a lot of Democrats don't talk about it, but we owe our veterans a lot. And for wars that I opposed, for a war that I opposed. There's nothing like, you know, going through a deployment schedule, overseeing the National Guard, and sending people to a war that you oppose. But that's what we did and we had to do. But now the veterans are back, and we need to commit to them in ways because they're here with us a long time, and they fought a war that we owe for them. So on my website are all of those platforms, many more to come. But I did have to put that in anyway. Look, we are judged as a society and who we are as people by how well we prepare each other for whatever comes our way, and also by how many people belong to that conversation. My situ was right. We all belong. She belongs. I belong. You all belong. And I am grateful for your time today, for hearing me out in this important conversation for a race that matters a lot. Thank you. Sorry, I went over. I'll be short on my answers.
Thank you. I'm going to start off with one question, and then
Okay.
after the answer to that question, raise your hand if you have one, and I'll do my best to work the room and get everyone a chance to speak. So our first question is around welfare reform. You know, that's been debated over the last few months, and the proposals that were being considered, some of them would have required an 8-month pregnant woman to show proof of an ongoing job search for benefits. 4,500 people would have been removed from disability assistance. Immigrants could be removed from their housing. Can you talk about, as governor, how you view attempts to change welfare reform and what you would do in standing up for low-income families?
Right. So everyone heard the question, sort of low-income families, welfare reform. So let me tell you where I am, being someone who's worked with government agencies all my life and overseen them. You cannot blame the recipients of government flaws for the government flaws. So if there is egregious behavior, if people are getting benefits that they don't deserve, it's on me as the governor to make sure that the system works accurately. I think the system is good and fine. I actually think that if you don't, this is how I think about prison reform too. We have two options here, right? One is to help people get the assistance they need in ways that bring them in, right? Help them survive and thrive, and ultimately so their children will thrive even more, or neglect. And we know what neglect looks like. So I am committed to social services. You'll see it in my criminal justice program. I mean, I know that that is how we stop a lot of other ills in society, and would continue the progressive reforms that exist now, and not blame, you know, every, you know, news headline of some egregious behavior is on government to fix, not on the rightful recipients to be harmed by. That's.
Yesterday, James Hansen from NASA was saying that the 2%, 2 degrees Celsius level is way too high, and that 1% would be barely tolerable. We're at 0.8 now.
Yeah.
And we've been talking in the state with several groups about the idea of a revenue-neutral carbon tax, similar to what British Columbia has been doing very successfully for 5 years. Have you been able to look into this?
Yes.
Or would you be in favor of a revenue-neutral?
Yes, I do, and I think most people. So climate change takes two pieces. So let me just talk a carbon tax, and appropriately, I would say progressive carbon tax, that the biggest polluters get taxed the most. It works. We have seen it. The federal government can't get it passed. This is what makes state governments so great. No, I mean it. No, it's just necessary for people. I would say the state government, I've worked in both. It's like so gratifying because you can actually get things done, because breaking down the silos is maybe that much easier, but also because we are, trust me, I've been to 44 other states, we're pretty good. And so I would be, and I think it's also investments in clean energy and clean energy technology. So that's on the stop it from happening. On the unfortunately it's already happening side, I actually think the challenge of climate change right now, I mean, it's technological, and it's also a governance challenge for a home rule state. You know, Boston can do its thing and save the innovation district, but like, you know, Quincy's right there, Revere's right there. It's like, you know, so this is where a state actually its capacity to force regional approaches and to focus efforts on regional solutions. This is where state government is actually unique as compared to what every mayor can do. I would also think it's an ownership issue. Anyone who works on this issue, my guess is if you work on it, there's like 30 state agencies that you can name that have some piece of it. I saw the same problem in the federal government. So I would appoint someone in my office to invest their sole energy on making sure that state government is working on this issue across the board, because I do think it's an internal governance challenge as well as an external one. I don't like saying climate change is our, but I think we need it now. I mean, we are a state that, we've seen it, and we are vulnerable. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't be answering. Hi.
You spoke eloquently about the role of immigrants in our society, and just today there was an article in the paper about how our population is growing relative to the rest of the country. So I'm wondering, as governor, what initiatives would you launch to make this a more hospitable and supportive environment for new members?
Okay, and I don't even have to say it as a governor. I'm on record in this regard and push for it. So from a public safety perspective, driver's licenses is a good thing for anyone who gets behind a car. From a public safety perspective, more people who have taken tests and have insurance is a good thing. So then, and it's good for immigrants to access. I was part of the team on the federal level for comprehensive immigration reform, pushing it and all the different pieces of it, and does include enforcement. But understanding that even if we talk about raising, an important initiative of raising the minimum wage, for example, it really gets undermined when you have 14 million people, not in this state, but nationwide, who are sort of outside that system. And I think it's why unions are supporting comprehensive immigration reform as well, that the strength of the American workforce only works if everyone's in the system. And also I think there's a platform role. So I mean, not in the JB progressive crowd do you hear this, but I go throughout the state and look, there's just a sense that maybe things work better with not our party in charge. And what I like to say, that sort of, I mean, look, between Dukakis and Deval Patrick, it was Republicans. And so what I like to say to people is, if you believe in this governor is going to be governor, the next governor, to the last 2 years of the Obama administration. And whatever you say about the Obama administration needs Massachusetts in terms of comprehensive immigration reform, gun control, climate change initiatives, any of those progressive causes that maybe we could get through the federal government. But comprehensive immigration reform is who I am. It is what I would do from the bully pulpit, and in terms of all the state policies matters, ending 287G, any remnants of it, secure communities. I think this state is in the right place, and I fought for it, fought to make it clear when I was at DHS, and integrating immigrants for the long term to be part of who we are and part of this great state.
Yes, what do you think of the merits of following Vermont's example and instituting a single-payer healthcare system?
It's a great question. So you asked about single payer. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I think the merits are great. And now I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I think Massachusetts, so I think if I'm governor, if I'm unlucky, I've got 4 years. If I'm lucky, I've got 8 years. And I've got limited time and goodwill, if any, with Beacon Hill. So where will I expend my energies? I will be honest with you. It probably would not be on pushing for single payer, because I think the next issue is really cost reduction. And you can probably do it without single payer. I'm just not convinced that you can get that fight. You can win that fight easily here without disrupting patient care, right? Because we're going through all sorts of issues right now. Without a big fight with the industry as well as with those who oppose it. And because I think we're in a pretty good shape, not perfect, I'm promising you not perfect. And my job as governor is to make sure that I hate calling it, I guess I can call it Obamacare, that Obamacare and the Massachusetts system integrate, and that we now focus on the cost controls. The commission is going to come out with its recommendations early next year. The next governor will own them. So that's where I'll be on. That's where I am. I agree with it, but I also want to get stuff done, and that one is just, it's going to be hard.
How about
divesting the state pension fund from fossil fuels.
Yes, I like the idea, and let me tell you why I like the idea. Because what I've seen is that we can do it without it being disruptive to pensions, right? Because the most important thing is that we're not using the pensions. If I'm told otherwise, I might change my mind, but at least what I have seen. So when I get in, if it's not resolved by then, I would want to see, does the treasurer and the Treasury Department believe that you can do this without disrupting what our state workers deserve? Is it feasible? But for me, even if it's just a statement, it's probably a good statement for this state. So at least right now, what I've seen, yeah.
Thank you. White shirt in the back, sir.
I just want to transition back to healthcare for
Yeah.
a minute. We've had a lot of national discourse about
Yeah.
mental health
Right.
and things like that. And I think Massachusetts is often a leader. We've been seen as the model for healthcare here in our state. And I want to know what you, as governor, specifically in regards to mental health, be consistent. We've seen Medicare and Medicaid not reimbursing at the same rates. There's no parity. We consistently see inpatient closures everywhere. In our own backyard, Faulkner was facing significant closures.
Right.
And Mayor Menino, came out swinging about it and defended that. And I want to know what you will do as governor, to make sure the mental health is kept
Given
at the same
parity.
level.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the recommendations you're hearing from all of us, including Attorney General Martha Coakley, are really important to give a mental health parity. The Affordable Care Act does give mental health parity for the most part in a lot of its programs. That is great news. And so that's why I want to talk if implementation is going to be what we need to ensure. I also think that our failure to address it impacts all other remnants. I'll tell you, something that I propose in the criminal justice reform initiative. So our highest per capita population entering the prisons is veterans. Really? This is, and as it's because of mental health issues, drug abuse, all related to. So one of the things that I do propose is steering them away from a very expensive criminal justice system and giving them the mental health services through either the VA, but also state services that matter. But I'm totally there with the other candidates. I think it's key, and now it's the implementation of the ACA.
Far in the back.
Oh yeah, hi.
It says 654, an act to update wiretap and perception
Okay.
law. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, so tell me the details.
Well, wiretap laws are very, very old.
Yeah.
J.A. Hoover was in charge of the FBI the last time they were updated. This is a bill to update them.
Yeah.
My personal view is that it's a very friendly bill for just attorneys and detectives.
Right.
But not so friendly to people who value their privacy. Since you're unaware of that bill, maybe I'll ask you another question.
Just more generic. I'm happy to answer generically too, given my background.
How do you feel? Do
Yeah.
you think that the wiretap laws need updating? And how do you feel about privacy?
Yeah. So, obviously, yes. And that's a totally fair question. So, and the good thing about having written a book about it is how I stand. So, I can't talk about these things in the abstract because a lot of what matters as a lawyer, right, as someone who looks at this, is what kind of oversight, right? If law enforcement needs a certain authority, what kind of oversight is there? A judicial warrant in the process? All those questions that matter, because the more oversight and regulation there is of some activity, let's say wiretapping, the more likely it is that there's going to be fewer abuses. And we've seen that played out both in the federal government and state government. So let me tell you what I did, and then you can get a sense of maybe what I believe. So when we came in, we being the Deval-Patrick administration, so remember it was Governor Romney who had been governor before, and I inherited a homeland security apparatus, including the fusion centers, which are very controversial, sharing of information up and down the chain. I oversaw our fusion center. And I looked at it and I said, what the heck? Because there was no privacy policy governing the information that was being shared up or down. It took a lot of banging my head, but we became the first state to adopt a privacy policy for the Fusion Center. It's not something the ACLU loves. I'm willing to admit it. But, you know, part of what I want to do is, you know, and have done is you get into government and you make it better absent your effort. So that is how I think about privacy issues and the balance. It's so hard to judge in the abstract. And I actually think we'll never be done with that debate either. That may not be a bad thing, you know. Yeah.
Casinos.
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have them? No, I'm joking. So repeal or not repeal? Do I like them? Do I hate them? What's the, you know?
Okay, I work closely with Native Americans
Okay.
in Boston Harbor. I understand the tragic irony of that connection.
Yeah.
I have construction workers in my family and lots of friends. I still think they're a bad thing.
Yes. Okay. So let me tell you where I am on casinos, because apparently I have not been on record enough, according to a Globe column today. So let me actually, which was bizarre because I'm totally on record, including in the Globe. I actually think that the legislation as written ought to stay put, and let me tell you why. So I'm not going to go. The repeal is not going to be on day one. So there were three things in the legislation that were important given revenue generation. One is we maxed out at 3. Which is important for the state. 2 is there was so much state oversight that some question whether there will ever be casino. And 3 was community engagement. Do I love casinos? No. Do I know that they could generate revenue as a governor? Yes. Do I know that 36 other states have them? Yes. So we're not like some outlier. And I want to see, you know, whether we're going to have 1, 2, or 3, because for me as the next governor, it isn't so much yes or no. It is whether I inherit a budget that anticipated casino revenue that no longer has it. And that's how I think about it now. So, and where I am, you know, apparently I didn't say that enough, but I'm saying it now to State House News.
I had a question about veterans issues.
Yes.
I know you were in the Homeland Security Department
Yeah.
of the state, but the Department of Veterans
I know.
Affairs for the state, I was looking at their website a couple weeks ago, and they actually haven't updated their newsletter since March of 2012.
Okay.
My husband served in Afghanistan, and I understand it's mainly federal.
Right.
And given that the VA takes so long to process claims, when you
Yeah.
go to look at the state website to see what the state can do, aside from a $1,000 welcome home bonus and some tuition incentives, what as governor could you actually do to help out veterans
Right.
that are looking for services from the state while they're waiting
For
for the
the
government to
So, yeah, and actually, so one of my proposals is a stopgap measure, because you remember when we went through the sequester, do you remember everyone was like, oh, but our troops will be fine? That was not true. I know, no, I mean, it was totally not true. Veteran services had a gap. So one thing I would ensure is that we have an emergency pool, or we use our rainy day fund to fill in that gap, because that just seems to me like an easy solution at this stage, right? That you don't have a gap in services if the feds screw up and the state can fill in the gap. There are also other things that state government can do, not just for the National Guard, but for active service. So job training, job programs. One of the things I worked on was, as you know, a lot of veterans and military have these amazing skills. But they don't translate very well when you're going through an HR process at a big firm. And so one of the things that we did is we worked on so like if I told you, what does a chief of staff for the Army staff sergeant do, you'd be like, I have no idea. But so if you can translate it, then those skills become necessary. Another issue that I would push is if you drive a Humvee in Afghanistan during a war, I do believe that those hours spent driving that truck should be allowable for you to get a license, a state license to perform jobs here, right? So one thing I also propose is to make the licensing system stronger. So there are a number of things that a governor can do, and also just to focus attention on this issue. What a lot of people, you know, when I say to people, the Veterans Administration, veterans are declining in the state. We have about 400,000 veterans in the state. They're declining, which is sort of counterintuitive, but it's because obviously the World War II and Vietnam veterans are passing away. And what we're going to be left with is discrete, the real 1%, the less than, or the other 1%, that are dispersed throughout all of our communities in the state. who are being serviced by a Veterans Administration that was created for conscription during World War II, meaning you got to travel for your dental appointment that you could take down the street, all that stuff. I actually think that both from the pulpit, but also trying to utilize federal funds to make veterans, access to veterans' health and mental care more local, or even on the internet. I mean, it's just, the whole system is just set up poorly right now, and we could be really, really creative. We already have been, actually. This governor and Secretary Nee have been very good.
I mean, just like the VA to make a claim,
It's
veterans
just,
have to wait over a year for
yeah.
individual therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, and why they have to have therapy from the VA, goodness knows. I mean, look, so, I mean, we have an entire system of healthcare that we're setting up in which people can choose their provider, and veterans should be given the same services. The whole system was just set up in a way in which there were just massive amounts of people who needed services. It was, it was like McVeteran, right? It's like McDonald's. And now we have just much more refined needs for longer periods of time. And I hear you, and we'll continue to fight for it. And thank you, by the way, for your service. Oh, I thought you said you did, so. Okay, well, thank him.
Another question?
Oh.
Chuck.
I guess as we become more polarized in terms of wealth and income inequality, we're seeing the American dream. Now you have to move to Canada, right?
Right.
You really want to have social mobility and opportunity. And I'm curious just on, what are the intervention points at the state level where we could make a difference, whether, in terms of reducing college access debt.
Right.
How do you kind of reverse 30 years of income inequality at a state level?
That's a great way of thinking about it, and this is where my lack of borders helps, because you cannot answer that question as solely an economic, educational, or housing. I mean, it's all part of this complex thing. So let me, and I didn't get into it in the speech because I saw my timer go, but I'm glad you asked the question. I like data-driven solutions. And we'll fight for those if the data's on my side. So pre-K is pretty obvious to me, and it's not that expensive, sort of over the years. So I would push for that again. The governor, people always say, oh, the governor didn't get this. The governor actually got a lot. And you know what? You want a governor who's going to do the big ask and not settle where Beacon Hill wants him to settle, or her settle at the moment. You want the big ask. And I've done that all my career. So pre-K would be the focus, because the way I look at it is, and I have kids who have gone through the public school system, is if you, in Cambridge, if you, that gap that is created between 2 and 5 is almost like, the interventions that have to occur to try to close that gap could have been so easily solved by investments at that age. And then plus it frees up mothers and fathers to go back to work and invest in the income that is going to then stabilize the kids and all that stuff. So pre-K, your access points is really important. So pre-K. On the other end, as I said, data-driven. I am very much taken with the higher ed data that I see, community colleges and the UMass system and the entire system, which shows a gap that we know, as I said, there's a lot of the answers are there between the jobs that are going to grow here and the jobs that will come here, as I said, and stay here, and what our kids are graduating with. The nice thing about the UMass community college is that our students stay here. We invest in them and they stay here. So why not try to employ them? And that gap of 40 to 50, I may be off, but by the year 2030, I'm forgetting the name of the report, but anyway, is a gap that can be filled by greater focus on those needs, healthcare, biotech technology, and other services so that we can close that gap. That's what we owe. That's what we owe our students that are going through our colleges. So that's 2 points. In the outside of big cities like ours, so you think of you think about the gateway cities, so a statewide solution. So the challenge of gateway cities is to invest in them in a way that's sustainable over long term. So 10 or 15 years ago, the notion of gateway cities came to be nationally. And everyone thought, gosh, if we put a prison or a courthouse in the city center, that will be fabulous, right? I mean, because that will re-enliven these cities. Well, we know that's not true. We know the arts and crafts like in Lowell or New Bedford and museums and universities like what we're seeing going on in Lowell. That is where these cities thrive. And then if you can build the infrastructure so people can get to jobs outside that city center, you're going to start to see the kind of changes we're seeing in Lowell. Look, you can think about Newburyport now. Newburyport was not what Newburyport was 20 or 30 years from now. And that was because an investment in arts and small businesses and museums there to enliven the city center so that people will go. So there are many access points, and a governor can support the creative activity of a lot of these mayors. We have really good gateway city mayors, and also use your checkbook vis-a-vis the community colleges and the University of Mass system to demand greater career training, career services for the jobs that will be here, which is good. So there's a lot of different points, right, to lower it. So, thank you. Hi.
Hi. I'm curious as to what your views are on how the Patrick administration has rationed state capital spending, and if there are any capital spending initiatives that you're particularly enthusiastic about.
I actually have to ask you, I don't know if I can answer that question right now. What do you mean by rationing, like in terms of the priorities?
There are limits on state borrowing and how that's affected various public investment projects, whether it be infrastructure or other programs.
So I don't know enough to answer your question. So let me just tell you how I think about it, and then I'll get back to you because I don't know. I mean, in terms of his priorities, so for me, it would be those kinds of borrowing and bond activity would focus on infrastructure for predominantly, as I've said, and I talk about specific areas like ports, the Port of Boston, for example, and creative ways to fund some of those expenditures. So you can have taxes; those always happen. You can have borrowing and lending, but some creative things that have come out of other states, I think we should start to try. For example, like a private infrastructure bank, and I don't know if you're familiar with them. The governor actually tried one, but the recession hit right then. So I would look to state or regionally beneficial state investments in infrastructure, and maybe look for public-private partnerships so that you relieve the burdens on the state and the private sector pays for things that they benefit from. But I'll get back to you on sort of a priorities list. I don't know if I can answer that. So thanks. Oh, not again. Okay. No, I did it again.
Speaking of higher education,
yes.
you mentioned before, what, if anything, could you do about paying the cost of going to school? Right now, I mean, if we don't know, it's like about $25,000 a year to go to UMass.
Yes.
It's going up about 5% a year.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do, not only to stop that increase, but maybe even to
decrease? Yeah. So there's a couple things that we can do. So one, and it's not just tuition; it's now fees, right? So if you actually combine, it's all fees, right? I mean, it's right. So it's, but I mean, so you can cap. So capping the tuition is not enough, right? So in other words, the benefit of capping for 2 years. So there are a couple things that this governor has proposed and that the president has proposed in his higher education program that I would support. I would support cap on fees and other expenditures that do not go to the issue of learning and education, right? So you make the UMass system sort of prove where the money is. And I actually think a focus on that is good for the system because it's trying to self-correct as well. You support loan forgiveness for which this state does, as does the federal government, for students going into certain fields. So it may not benefit all students, but if some students go into not just the medical fields, but military or public safety, public education, that you begin to think about loan forgiveness. And other states, as you know, Oregon and others have done that. So I think there's ways that you can knock it off on the edges. Reducing it, I think, is a lot harder at this stage and will probably take a couple of years. I mean, as this higher education system goes through its own administrative control cost evaluation, stabilizing might be easier than reducing at this stage. But I hear you, and I think you can probably reduce a lot of the fees.
Because if you look at what's happened over the years, the state
It's administrative.
paying like 65, 70% of the
Right.
cost of the student. Now it's down to 50, well, it's less than 50%, they raised it to 50%. But that's how come, that's one of the big reasons the price is.
Right, and it hits, right, and then we pat ourselves on the back and saying we've controlled the tuition, but it's all the other crap, all the other stuff that costs a lot. So I didn't say that. Last one? Oh.
In terms of sales per capita, that's, metropolitan Boston ranks as one of the top 3 metropolitan areas in the world. And but in our inner city, in the middle of the center of this metropolitan center, 40,000 households have no wealth at all.
Right.
And all be primarily
Right.
Latino households.
Right.
We've had a mayoral process
Yeah.
for the past 10 years to develop 1 million square feet of property in the center of Roxbury.
Right.
But not develop the people to take part in that.
Right.
So we've had a failure in the middle of our city because those properties are still vacant and still fenced off from opportunities. How would you as a governor try to develop people instead of just trying to develop property?
Right, so I know how to develop people, and I might take it out of Boston just because the old mayor and the new mayor are still around. It's like, what's worse than having one mayor? It's having two at the, until January. So I'll keep quiet on, but to particular housing policies. But it's all about affordable housing at this stage. And here's what a governor can do. I can use how I would disperse funds to housing authority. First of all, get rid of a lot of these housing authorities. As I've,
Can I just
yeah,
that's probably a good comment.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for is the difference between giving people fish
Yeah.
and getting people to learn how to fish.
Right.
So the issue is giving them affordable housing is one thing, but giving them the potential to actually pay for housing is another thing. So the question is, how do we get people back into the economic system where they actually can provide value and get money in return for it?
Right, and I sorry I misunderstood. So a little bit of what I've been talking about before, right? So it is Massachusetts job creation. I don't like talking about job creation, and it means discussing, tax policy, luring companies here, getting them to invest here. So one is Massachusetts job creation, and the other is job training. It is as simple as that. If you can train people for jobs that are viable here, and these are good jobs, union jobs, whatever jobs, then you begin to create or recreate a lower middle class that then becomes a middle class. I hear you on that. But you also have, a living issue here, which is the capacity to live in a lot of these cities is now not available even to the middle class, and that's a housing problem, I think.
So I just want to build on that a little bit.
Yes.
Sort of. Last year in the budget process, the governor proposed, as you're probably well aware, what many, I think, in this room view as a progressive change to the income tax code, reducing the regressive sales tax and the regressive gas tax, and focusing a lot of the revenue in his proposal around early education and care and
infrastructure.
Infrastructure. The legislature rejected that proposal. As governor, which side will you be on? Would you have been on?
Okay, so can I just also clarify your question? No, put it in the caveat. So the way the media reports it is the governor got a big loss. He did not win everything he wanted. But can we just be clear? $500 million is a lot of money for infrastructure, and whatever the final number was for pre-K. So thinking about the process as a governor, so I liked the budget. Maybe at different ends, I would have put focus elsewhere. Made, specifically, but, a gas tax, penalty taxes, that's where we should be as progressive Democrats. It seems to me not debatable at this stage. But what is important, right, is that you need a governor, and a Democratic governor, even if it's not me, who's going to be asking for $1 billion, well aware that you're going to get $500 million, because that $500 million investment in infrastructure is really, really good for the state. So I agreed with the budget. I might disagree on the margins, but overall, the progressive.
Or the final budget.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty pragmatic. with the proposal, yes. With the final, you know, you sort of say, I got halfway there, and that's a lot better than not trying. And that's sort of my attitude, you know, and that if you don't try, then I mean, you know what it looks like. It's pretty stagnant, and it's pretty normal, and it's not going to be visionary for, you know, the just amazing state that we are and that we can still become, right? And so, yeah, so that's where I am. And on the taxes, yes.
Right. So we know that there's many programs we want to invest
Yes.
in, job training,
Right.
schools, etc. As governor, will you explore additional
Yes.
progressive
Yes.
tax?
Yeah. Yeah. Period. And let me just, you know, my first day of work will be really, really boring. So if you want me to do something really exciting, well, look, I mean, I've taken over a lot of offices. I have built, you know, when I oversaw 80 federal agencies in five states, all Republican governors during the BP oil spill. I directed the BP oil spill. So talk about no rules, making government work when people need it the most. People ask me how I'll prepare for Beacon Hill. I have worked for Beacon Hill. I also have spent a summer with Bobby Jindal and Rick Perry, so I feel like I got good training. You know, you just keep pushing, and I don't have a silver bullet. I mean, I'm being pretty realistic here. On the other hand, it can work. I have seen it work if you are willing to be bold, to not look through silos, and to look through the solutions that will work. So you don't get everything on the first ask, but if the next person who comes around asks again, maybe you get a little bit more.
We have a question over here, and we'll have one more after that.
What's your stance on raising the charter school cap?
So I am, at least in Boston and places where a wait list for raising it. But I actually now that I've said it, there isn't actually yes, no answer, at least for now, not indefinitely and not with no number. Let me also tell you, I hate this debate, not because it doesn't matter, but because being in the public school system, it's like irrelevant for not irrelevant, but for parents. I'm committed to the public school system. What the public school system needs is a lot of nurturing and not debates that pit unions against, you know, educational reformers or however you want to put the us versus them. And so when I think about, I want to focus on the experience in the classroom for our public school students. And that includes not only pre-K, but also technology. When I think about the state, our students being prepared for a global competition, which is what we should make them prepared for. And all students, not, you know, from all walks of life, that is the world they'll be entering, being technologically savvy, technologically proficient, and our teachers being equally so is where I put a lot of my education investment. So it's not, I can answer the question, but I also want to have a bigger debate about the experience of our kids in schools. And we tend to get focused on that one.
Last question, your pick, Juliette.
Okay.
Hi. You talked about job training and,
yes.
and workforce development, but what about controlling the costs or subsidizing the cost of childcare?
Yes, that too. Wait, I don't like your question. I'm going to ask him now. No, I'm joking. No, I agree. And that's where I think universal pre-K is essential, because what people think about the kids' experience is just what I think of. And I'll tell you honestly, with my kids enter kindergarten, you can see who has had, my kids benefited from daycare, who has had a learning experience before. And you can see it, unfortunately, in 5th grade, too, right? You can see that gap never closing for our kids. So that is also why I would promote universal pre-K and subsidizing daycare, because it also gets the parents or single parents or whatever parents back into the workforce, which then supports the child's learning experience. So, yeah, that's me. Is that it? Oh, come on. You already got, I mean, the climate change and the... Oh, no. I'll find you after. Oh, come on. Don Berwick, I think, is there. Oh, okay. No, what did you say? Oh, no. I need a lifeline. Call my son.
Jacoby, what do you think of Jacoby? Can you comment on Jacoby outbreak?
No, I'm joking. Love it.
Why is he being deported?
Why is he right? I would fight tooth and nail to save his Massachusetts. I'm actually inducting him as a Massachusetts citizen at Faneuil Hall tomorrow, and it will be beautiful. I'll weep. I'll talk about us belonging. I love sports. I also have a 10-year-old son, so he will be my lifeline on that. I am, as some of you know, I've written a lot about also envisioning Boston as a place that would host major sporting events, because I think that would be exciting. But I'm resigned to the trade. That's all I'll say.
I have a son named Kobe.
I know.
2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. So, oh wow, that's a long closing. I'm not going to take 2 or 3 minutes. I'll be faster. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I had a longer closing. Raise your hand. Where are you? Jordan? Everyone raise their hands. I am going to say one thing, which is democracy is awesome. It also means you have to get up off of your house sometime in February or March and caucus. And I just want to have the debate. I think the Democrats are better for it. So if you want to help us out, these two right here, thank you.